My name is Harlan. I am 52 years old, and for the last 28 years, the most important things in my life have been my wife, Clara, my woodshop classroom, smelling of sawdust and promise, and my son, Leo. That Tuesday started like any other, with the familiar morning noise and the weight of my old leather backpack over my shoulder. Leo had been quiet lately, like he was working on a problem only he could see. I felt a fatherly worry, but I had no idea how deep that problem went. Before I tell you about the morning everything changed, I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you have ever looked at someone you love and felt a tiny cold sliver of doubt, hit subscribe. This story goes deep. The foundation of my life was built on things I could touch and understand. Grain in a piece of oak, the reliable hum of my table saw, the way Clara's hand fit in mine after all these years. Our house was a living museum of our lives, filled with her thriving plants and my woodwork projects, bookshelves, and coffee tables that held our history. Leo was our greatest collaboration, a 17-year-old with a quiet mind and an artist's hands. For years, our weekend project was a 1967 Mustang Fastback, a rusting shell we were bringing back to life bolt by bolt in the garage. That was our church, the scent of WD-40 and old gasoline, our incense. But in the months leading up to that Tuesday, a slow chill had settled into our warm house. It began with small absences. Leo stopped coming out to the garage. The Mustang sat under its canvas cover, gathering a new layer of dust. He missed family pizza night, citing a heavy load of schoolwork. His art, which used to be intricate pencil sketches of engines and birds, turned into dark, swirling abstracts drawn behind his closed bedroom door. When I asked about them, he would just shrug and say he was experimenting. Clara and I talked about it over our evening coffee, a ritual we had perfected over 3 decades. She is a landscape architect, a solver of spatial problems. She said it was senior year stress, the pressure of college applications looming. I said maybe it was just a phase, a young man pulling inward to figure himself out. We were a good team, rationalizing the warning signs, smoothing them over like a rough piece of wood. We loved him too much to be truly afraid. Then came the questions. Odd, out-of-context questions. One night, while I was balancing the checkbook, Leo leaned against the doorframe and asked out of the blue how my teacher's pension worked. Was it a monthly payment? What happened to it if I, was not around to collect it? Another time, he asked Clara about life insurance policies, how long it took for a beneficiary to get the money. We exchanged a glance over his head, a silent communication of mild concern. We chalked it up to a budding interest in finance, or maybe a morbid school project. We were so busy being sensible parents that we missed the terror hiding behind his eyes. The morning it happened, the kitchen was its usual symphony of minor chaos. Clara was late for a client meeting, searching for her keys. The toast was threatening to burn. And Leo, my usually sullen teenager, was at the stove scrambling eggs. This in itself was unusual. He was being helpful, asking me about my day, what I had first period. His energy was all wrong, a kind of forced, brittle cheerfulness. My old leather backpack, the same one I had carried since my first teaching job, was on the kitchen chair, its mouth open as I packed my lunch. I turned to the counter to fill my travel mug with coffee. And that is when I saw it. In the reflective surface of our stainless steel toaster, blurred but unmistakable, I saw the movement of my son's arm. He was not reaching for the salt, he was reaching for my backpack. My entire body went still. The coffee stream hit the mug, the sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence of my own perception. I didn't turn. I didn't breathe. I just watched that dim reflection, my heart giving one single hard thump against my ribs like a fist on a door. Then I finished pouring the coffee, the stream steady even though my hand wanted to shake. I made a decision in that frozen second. A father's instinct, or maybe a predator's, to play dead until you understand the threat. I tightened the lid on my mug with a deliberate twist and turned around my face, a mask of normal morning fatigue. "Those eggs look great, buddy," I said. "Thanks." He flinched, just a tiny jerk of his shoulders. "No problem, Dad." I slung my backpack over my shoulder, feeling its familiar weight now charged with something alien. I gave Leo a quick, firm squeeze on the shoulder, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. "Love you, kid. Have a good day." "You too," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. The walk to my truck was 20 steps. It felt like 20 miles. Every nerve was screaming. I got in, closed the door, and sat in the driver's seat, the engine still off. The early morning sun cut through the windshield. I listened to the tick of the cooling engine from my last trip. Then, methodically, I opened the backpack. My hands were steady. A teacher's hands used to handling sharp tools in fragile student projects. I unpacked it item by item: lunchbox, gradebook, a novel I was rereading, a bundle of pencils, and then tucked into the inner sleeve behind the gradebook my fingers found it. A small rectangular bag, vacuum sealed. Inside was a green leafy plant material. It looked like marijuana, but not quite. The color was a little too uniform, the texture a little too fine. I brought it closer to my face. There was no earthy, skunky smell. Nothing. It was odorless. That detail was more frightening than the thing itself. This was not a kid stashing his own stash in his dad's bag by accident. This was a deliberate placement. He had planted it on me. The implications exploded in my mind like shrapnel. He wanted it to be found on me. At school, during a random search in my truck, he wanted me to get in trouble, fired, maybe arrested. Why? What had I done that was so terrible my own son wanted to destroy my life? A cold, clear fury washed over me, burning away the initial shock. This was not an emotional problem anymore. It was a tactical one. I'm a problem solver by nature. I teach kids to measure twice, cut once. So I measured the situation. Confronting him now with no proof of his intent would lead to denials, tears, a dramatic scene that solved nothing. I needed to understand the why, and to do that I needed to control the game. I took out my phone and took a single clear photograph of the bag on the passenger seat, the morning light illuminating its contents. Evidence. Then I put everything back in my backpack except for the little bag that I placed in the cup holder. I started the truck and drove to school. I taught my first period intro to carpentry class on autopilot. My voice explained the difference between a rip cut and a cross cut while my mind was back in my kitchen watching that reflection. During my planning period, I examined the bag again under the bright lamp on my desk. It was definitely not standard cannabis. It looked like one of those synthetic blends or an herbal mix you could buy online. The complete lack of scent confirmed it was processed manufactured. This was premeditation with a capital P. On my lunch break, I drove home. The house was empty, Clara at work. I went upstairs to Leo's room. It was a familiar landscape of chaos, rumpled sheets, art supplies covering the desk clothes on the floor. I went to his dresser. The top drawer was where he kept his t-shirts. I opened it. A jumble of band logos and solid colors. I pushed the stack aside and slid the small damning bag all the way to the back against the rear wall of the drawer. Then I covered it back up. Back at my truck, I retrieved a small, empty, similar-looking plastic bag from my glove box. I had used it to hold wood stain samples for a class project. I placed this empty bag into the inner sleeve of my backpack, right where the other one had been. The trap was set. The bait was switched. Now I waited. The afternoon was an exercise in psychological torture. Every minute in my classroom stretched into an hour. I was teaching a sophomore class how to dovetail joints, a lesson about interlocking pieces, about strength through connection. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. All I could think about was disconnection, betrayal. I watched the clock over the door, imagining the scene at home. Leo would return from school. He would see my backpack. He would wait for a moment when he was alone, his heart pounding just like mine had been. He would search for the bag to retrieve it or to verify it was still there, planning his next move. And he would not find it. He would find my decoy, an empty bag. Or maybe he would not even find that if he did not search thoroughly enough. His plan, whatever it was, would be thrown into disarray. The hunter would find his own trap sprung. When the final bell rang, I packed up slower than usual. I drove home under a gray sky that matched my interior weather. I walked into the house, my backpack hanging from one shoulder. Leo was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. He was pale, the kind of pale that comes from the inside out. He was jittery, tapping his fingers against the granite. His eyes went straight to my backpack as I set it down on the bench by the door. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice casual. "How was your day?" "It was fine," he said, his voice too high. "How was yours?" "Oh, the usual," I said, walking to the fridge. I had a free period, so I did some organizing. Cleaned out my backpack. You would not believe the junk that accumulates in there. Old gum wrappers, receipts from last year. I even found this weird little empty bag, probably from those stain samples. Tossed it all. I said it while looking into the fridge as if commenting on the weather. When I turned with a soda in my hand, his face was the color of paper. The blood had drained so completely I thought he might faint. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with pure, undiluted panic. It was not the look of a guilty kid caught. It was the look of someone whose lifeline had just been cut. Just then, Clara came in through the garage door, her arms full of plant samples. She took in the scene instantly, her eyes darting from Leo's ghostly face to my carefully neutral one. "Hey, boys," she said, her tone deliberately light. "What did I miss?" "Nothing," Leo whispered, and then he bolted from the kitchen. We heard his feet pounding up the stairs, then the slam of his bedroom door. Clara looked at me. "Harlan." "What is going on?" later I said. "Let me talk to him first." We had a quiet, tense dinner. Leo did not come down. After we cleaned up, Clara and I sat on the back porch. The evening was cool. I showed her the photo on my phone. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Harlan, is that—" "I do not know what it is," I said, "but he put it in my bag this morning. I saw him." Why she breathed, her eyes filling not with anger but with a deep wrenching fear. Why would he do that? I do not know, but I think I'm about to find out. Clara gripped my arm. "There is something else," she said, her voice low. "A few weeks ago, he asked me about medical power of attorney. He wanted to know what happens if someone gets too sick to make their own decisions. He asked about symptoms, neurological symptoms, slurred speech, stumbling. I thought he was worried about his grandfather." Oh, Harlan. A new, more horrifying possibility began to coil in my gut, cold and heavy. This was not about getting me in trouble. This was about something else entirely. About 30 minutes after dinner, a loud thump came from upstairs, like a body hitting the floor. Then silence. Clara and I looked at each other. The time for waiting was over. I went upstairs alone. I knocked on his door. "Leo." No answer. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. He was sitting on the floor, his back against his bed, knees drawn up. In his hand, held limply between his thumb and forefinger, was the small sealed bag. His face was wet, his eyes red and empty. He looked up at me, and the expression there was beyond shame. It was devastation. "It is in my drawer," he said, his voice a hollow scrape. I closed the door behind me and sat down on the floor opposite him, leaving a few feet of carpet between us. It felt like a canyon. I looked at the bag in his hand, then back at his face. I kept my voice calm, flat. "Why, Leo? Why would you put that in my bag?" He did not speak for a long minute. He just stared at the bag as if it were a poisonous insect. When he finally spoke, the words came out in a broken, ragged stream, like he had been holding them back for months, and the dam had finally shattered. "I thought you were sick, Dad. Really sick. I heard you on the phone months ago. You were in your study and you said, the test results are that bad. And then you said, rapid progression, and you sounded scared. I thought it was you. I thought you were talking about yourself." A memory surfaced, vague and terrible. My cousin Philip, calling me last fall. He had just gotten a devastating diagnosis. We had that exact conversation. Leo must have been walking by, only heard my half filled in the blanks with his worst fears. "So you thought I was dying," I said, the pieces starting to click into a monstrous picture. He nodded, a frantic, jerky motion. I started looking things up online. The symptoms: muscle weakness, tripping, slurred speech. I started watching you. Every time you stumbled on the porch step, every time you were tired, I thought it was starting. I was so scared. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, the bag still clutched in the other. "I found this online forum. People talking about alternate treatments. Someone mentioned this herbal blend. They said it could mimic a neurological episode. Severe drowsiness, lack of coordination." My blood went cold. "You wanted to make me sick." "No," he cried, his voice cracking. "I wanted to make you get help. I thought if you had a scary episode, a fall or something, you would have to go to the hospital. They would have to run tests. They would find it early and you could get treatment. You and Mom were not talking about it. You were hiding it from me. I thought I had to force it. I had to make you see a doctor before it was too late." The room seemed to tilt. His betrayal was not born of malice, but of a terrified, desperate, twisted love. He had been living in a private hell of his own, making watching me like a time bomb, convinced he was the only one who could defuse it. The withdrawal, the dark art, the questions about money and legal documents. He was preparing for my decline. Preparing to be the adult. The anger I had nurtured all day evaporated, leaving behind a vast aching emptiness. My son had been suffering alone silently for months. And I, the man who was supposed to protect him from monsters, had become the monster in his closet. I had failed to see his fear. I had failed to create a space where he could bring his worst nightmare to me. The grief that washed over me was deeper than any anger could ever be. We sat on the floor for a long time in silence. The only sound was Leo's ragged breathing. The little bag of herbs sat between us on the carpet, a monument to his terrible loving mistake. "Okay," I said finally, my voice thick. "The first thing we do is kill the monster, right now." I took out my phone. I found my cousin Philip's number. I put the call on speakerphone and set the phone on the floor between us. Philip answered on the third ring. "Hey Harlan, what's up, Philip? I need you to do me a favor," I said, my eyes locked on Leo's. "I need you to tell Leo about your diagnosis, the one you told me about last fall." There was a pause on the line. "Oh, okay. Hi, Leo. Well, it's not great news. I was diagnosed with ALS back in October. The kind that moves pretty fast. That's what your dad and I were talking about. He's been a real support checking in on me." Leo was staring at the phone as if it were speaking an alien language. You're sick." "Not Dad." "Kiddo," Philip said, his voice gentle. "Just me, and I'm fighting like hell. Your dad's been helping me look into some clinical trials." The relief that washed over Leo's face was immediate and total. It was like watching a man who had been holding his breath underwater for 5 minutes finally break the surface. Then, as the relief receded, the true horror of his actions flooded in. His face crumpled. He buried his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, heaving sobs. The guilt was going to be his new prison. We talked to Philip for a few more minutes, me thanking him. After I hung up, I looked at my broken son. The fear was gone. Now we had to deal with the aftermath. "This is bigger than us, Leo," I said, not unkindly. "You have been carrying this alone for too long. That ends now. Tomorrow we are all going to see someone, a family therapist, and you are going to see someone on your own too." He looked up, startled. "A shrink." "A professional," I said. "Someone who can help you untangle this web you got stuck in. What you did was wrong, Leo, dangerously wrong. But the why is what we need to fix. That fear, that feeling that you couldn't come to us, that's the real problem. My active turn was not vengeance, it was triage. It was getting us the help we clearly needed." The next morning I called a practice recommended by our family doctor and booked the appointments. Clara was fully on board, her maternal instinct firmly in support mode now that the true enemy fear was identified. That evening, I sat with Leo in the living room. Clara was in the kitchen giving us space. "This is about trust, Leo," I said. "You thought you were saving me, but you chose a secret, dangerous plan over talking to your mom and me. That is the injury. You didn't trust us with your fear. We have to rebuild that. No more secrets, no more internet diagnoses. You talk to us, even if it's crazy. Especially if it's crazy." "Understood." He nodded, his eyes on the floor. "Understood." "And the Mustang?" I asked. He looked up, a faint glimmer of the old Leo in his eyes. "Maybe this weekend," maybe, I said, "one step at a time." The road back was not paved with dramatic speeches or quick fixes. It was paved with awkward silences in a therapist's office, with halting attempts to explain the inexplicable. Dr. Evans, a woman with a calm voice and kind eyes, helped us navigate the wreckage. In one session, Leo finally gave words to his terror. "I thought I was going to be alone. I thought I would have to take care of everything of Mom, of the house, and I didn't know how. I felt like a little kid the whole time. I realized with a jolt that in my focus on being a steady provider, a fixer of things, I might have made myself seem impervious to weakness. Had I ever shown him it was okay to be scared? Had I ever shared my own fears with him? The therapy was for me too. Slowly we began to rebuild the mundane bridges. Family dinners returned, the conversation stilted at first, then gradually easing. Leo brought a sketch pad to the table one night, not dark abstracts, but a detailed drawing of the Mustang's engine bay. Progress. One Saturday we went out to the garage. We pulled the canvas cover off the car. The dust made us both cough. Without a word, I handed him a sheet of fine grit sandpaper and pointed to the passenger side fender. He started sanding. The rhythmic, scratchy sound filled the space where words used to be. It was a start. We worked for an hour side by side, the radio playing classic rock, and for a little while it felt almost normal. The backpack, the catalyst for it all, I retired. I bought a simple canvas satchel. The old leather one I cleaned out thoroughly and took up to the attic. I didn't throw it away. It was part of our history now, a relic from the before times. Storing it away felt symbolic. We were not forgetting, but we were making space for something new. That was 2 years ago. The Mustang is not finished. We work on it some weekends when Leo is home from college. He is studying graphic design. His art is full of light and intricate patterns again. We still see Dr. Evans sometimes for tune-ups, as Clara calls them. The fear is gone, but the memory of its power is not. I learned that the deepest wounds are not always made by hate. Sometimes they are made by a love that is too frightened to speak its name. My son thought he was saving my life, and in his desperation, he almost broke our relationship beyond repair. The lesson for me was not about vigilance. It was about vulnerability. I had to learn to show my own cracks to make it safe for him to show his. Trust, I have come to understand, is not a fortress that never gets breached. It is a garden. It needs constant tending. You have to water it with honesty even when the truth is uncomfortable. You have to weed out the secrets before they take over. And sometimes, after a storm has ripped through you, have to replant everything, knowing it will grow back stronger where the roots were broken. Leo and I are closer now than we were before the backpack. It is a different closeness, harder one, more honest. We talk about real things. We are not just father and son. We are two people who have seen each other at our worst and decided to stay. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. The most important thing you can build for the people you love is not a perfect life, but a safe place. A place where the scariest thought, the most shameful fear can be laid on the table and examined under the light without judgment. Because sometimes the person you love is fighting a monster only they can see. And your job is not to tell them the monster is not real. Your job is to hand them a light and say, "Show me." Let us look at it together. If this story connected with you, if you have ever been the one hiding a fear or the one who missed the signs, I would really like to hear from you. Share your own experience in the comments below. How do you keep the lines of communication open in your family? Your story might help someone else. If you found this journey valuable, please give this video a like. It helps more people find these conversations. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about the messy, beautiful, and hard work of human connection. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, please share it with them. Thank you for listening and for being part of this community. Remember, it is never too late to start a new conversation. Wishing you and yours courage, understanding, and peace.